The snow fell silently on Christmas Eve, blanketing the city in white as families gathered behind warm, glowing windows. But in the deserted plaza of Morrison Financial Tower, a man in a $5,000 suit sat alone on a cold bench, his head buried in his hands, shoulders trembling with sobs he'd held back for far too long. Marcus Wellington had everything the world told him to want. At 42, he was the youngest CEO in his company's history, commanding boardrooms with the flick of his wrist and making decisions that affected thousands of lives. His penthouse overlooked the city like a throne room. His watch cost more than most people's cars. Yet tonight, on Christmas Eve, he sat in the freezing darkness outside his empty office building because he had nowhere else to go. The divorce papers had been finalized that morning. Jennifer had taken their daughter, Sophie, to her parents' house in Connecticut. "You chose your office over your family," she'd said. And he couldn't even argue because it was true. Every missed recital, every forgotten anniversary, every bedtime story he'd skipped for another conference call had led to this moment. His parents were gone. His brother hadn't spoken to him in years after a business disagreement. His friends, if he could even call them that, were colleagues who'd scatter the moment his title changed. He'd built an empire and lost everything that mattered. "Mister, are you okay?" The small voice cut through his despair. Marcus looked up, quickly wiping his eyes, and saw a little girl standing before him. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, wearing a worn pink coat that had seen better winters and clutching a stuffed rabbit with one missing eye. Her dark hair was pulled into pigtails, and her brown eyes looked at him with such pure concern that he felt something crack inside his chest. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he managed, his voice rough. "Where are your parents?" "My mom's inside." She pointed to the diner across the plaza, its neon sign reading Rosie's 24-hour kitchen, flickering against the falling snow. "She works there. I saw you crying from the window." She stepped closer, completely unafraid. "My teacher says it's okay for boys to cry too. You don't have to hide it." Something about her matter-of-fact kindness made Marcus's carefully constructed walls crumble. A fresh wave of tears spilled down his cheeks, and he didn't bother to hide them this time. The little girl studied him for a moment, then sat down beside him on the bench, her small legs swinging far above the ground. She held out her stuffed rabbit. "You can hold Mr. Floppy if you want. He always makes me feel better when I'm sad." Marcus found himself taking the worn toy, turning it over in his hands. "Thank you," he whispered. "Is it because you don't have a family for Christmas?" she asked with the blunt honesty only children possess. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The girl was quiet for a moment, thinking hard. Then her face brightened with an idea so pure and generous that it would change everything. "Don't cry, mister. You can borrow my mom. We don't have much, but we always have enough to share." "That's what Mom says." Marcus stared at her, stunned. This child, who had nothing compared to his wealth, was offering him everything she had. "Sweetie, I can't—" "Emma Rodriguez, what did I tell you about leaving the diner?" A woman rushed out of Rosie's, her waitress uniform visible under her open jacket. She was young, maybe 30, with the same warm brown eyes as her daughter and exhaustion etched into every line of her face. When she reached them, she pulled Emma close protectively, then really looked at Marcus, taking in his expensive suit, his obvious distress, the stuffed rabbit in his hands. Her expression softened immediately. "I'm so sorry," Marcus said quickly, standing and handing back the toy. She was just being kind. "I didn't mean to—" "Emma has a habit of adopting every sad soul she meets," the woman said, but there was no anger in her voice, only tired affection. She looked at him more carefully. "Are you all right, sir?" The formal "sir" should have created distance, should have reminded him of the gulf between their worlds. Instead, it highlighted everything wrong with his life. He'd surrounded himself with people who called him sir while forgetting how to connect with anyone, who saw him as simply human. "No," he admitted, the truth escaping before he could stop it. "No, I'm really not." Maria Rodriguez saw something in this broken man that her daughter had recognized immediately. Beneath the expensive clothes and executive bearing was someone utterly alone. and loneliness was something she understood intimately. She'd been working 2 jobs since Emma's father had left them 3 years ago, struggling to make rent on their tiny apartment, choosing between groceries and heat some months. But she'd learned that poverty of the wallet was nothing compared to poverty of the heart. She made a decision that defied every logical instinct about strangers and boundaries. Emma's right. You should join us for Christmas Eve dinner. When Marcus started to protest, she held up a hand. It's not charity. It's just dinner. No one should be alone tonight. 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself in their cramped 3rd-floor walk-up, so different from his sterile penthouse that it felt like entering another world. The apartment was tiny, the furniture old and mismatched, but Christmas lights twinkled around the windows, and the smell of something delicious filled the air. A small plastic tree stood in the corner, decorated with handmade ornaments and strings of popcorn. It's not fancy, Maria said, suddenly self-conscious as she saw him taking it in. It's perfect, Marcus said, and meant it. There was more warmth in this small space than in all his square footage combined. Emma dragged him to the tree. I made that star, she announced proudly, pointing to a slightly lopsided creation of cardboard and gold glitter. And that angel is from when I was 4. Mom keeps everything I make. Marcus thought of his own daughter's artwork, probably packed away in storage somewhere, because it didn't match his decorator's aesthetic. The thought made him physically ill. Dinner was simple. Roast chicken that Maria had gotten on sale, mashed potatoes, green beans and rolls. But it was prepared with such care, served with such love, that it tasted better than any Michelin-starred meal Marcus had eaten. Emma chattered throughout, telling him about her school play where she'd been a reindeer, her best friend Maya who could do a cartwheel, her dream of becoming a veterinarian someday. What do you do, Mr. Marcus? Emma asked, mouthful of mashed potatoes. Emma manners, Maria chided gently. I work with money, Marcus said slowly. I help companies grow and make decisions about business. Do you like it? Emma asked with that uncanny childhood ability to cut to the heart of things. Marcus opened his mouth to give his standard answer about challenge and achievement, then stopped. I used to think I did. Now I'm not so sure. After dinner, Emma insisted on showing him her room, a tiny space she'd decorated with drawings and a small bookshelf, filled with library books. Mom says we can't afford to buy books, but the library means we're millionaires because we can read anything we want, she explained seriously. Marcus picked up a worn copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. This was my daughter's favorite, he said softly. You have a daughter? Where is she? With her mother. They don't want to see me anymore. The words hurt to say out loud. Emma considered this with the gravity of a child trying to understand adult problems. Did you say sorry? Sometimes sorry isn't enough. Mom says sorry is just the beginning. Then you have to show you mean it by being different. Emma climbed onto her small bed. It's not too late, Mr. Marcus. It's never too late to try harder. When they returned to the living room, Maria was washing dishes at the sink. Marcus joined her automatically, picking up a towel to dry. You don't have to do that, she protested. Please, let me help. They worked in comfortable silence for a while before Maria spoke. Emma's father left when she was 4, said he wasn't cut out for family life, that he needed to find himself. She smiled sadly. Turns out finding himself meant finding someone else, who didn't come with responsibilities. It broke Emma's heart. She kept asking when Daddy was coming home, and I had to tell her he wasn't. She glanced toward Emma's room. That's why she reaches out to sad people. She remembers what it felt like to be left behind. I'm the one who left, Marcus confessed. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. I thought providing for them was enough. I thought success was the same as love. He set down the dish he was drying. I built everything they told me to build, and I ended up with nothing. So rebuild, Maria said simply. But this time build what actually matters. How do you do it? Marcus asked. You're working yourself to exhaustion. You have so little, but Emma is so happy, so full of love and generosity. How? Maria was quiet for a long moment. When Emma's father left, I had a choice. I could become bitter about what we didn't have, or grateful for what we did. I chose gratitude. Every night, we name 3 good things that happened that day. Some days it's hard to find them, but we always do. She looked at him directly. Money doesn't make people happy, Mr. Wellington. Love does. Purpose does. Being present for the people who matter does. You can't buy what we have here, but you can build it, if you're willing to actually show up for the work. It was nearly midnight when Marcus finally prepared to leave. Emma, fighting sleep in her mother's arms, roused herself to hug him goodbye. "Thank you for sharing your Christmas with me," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Will you try to get your family back?" Emma asked. "I don't know if I can, but I'm going to try. I'm going to be different, better." Emma smiled sleepily. "Good. Being different is hard, but Mom says hard things are usually the right things." At the door, Maria handed him a small package wrapped in newspaper comics. "Emma wanted you to have this." Inside was Mr. Floppy, the one-eyed rabbit. "I can't take her toy," Marcus protested. "She wants you to have someone to hold when you're sad," Maria said. "You can return him when you see us again, if you want to see us again." "I do," Marcus said immediately. "If that's okay." "More than okay." Emma could use more good people in her life, and I think you could too. Marcus walked back through the snowy streets, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit and feeling more awake than he had in years. When he reached his penthouse, he didn't see luxury anymore. He saw emptiness. But unlike earlier that evening, it wasn't an ending. It was a chance to start over. He pulled out his phone and texted Jennifer. "I know I don't deserve another chance. I know words are cheap and I've broken too many promises. But I want to change. Really change. Not just try harder at the same things, but become someone different. Someone who deserves to be Sophie's father. Someone who shows up. If you're willing to let me prove it, I'll spend every day for the rest of my life earning back what I threw away." He didn't expect a response. Not at midnight on Christmas Eve. But 30 minutes later, his phone buzzed. "Sophie asked about you tonight. She still loves you, Marcus. I still love you, somewhere under all the hurt. But love isn't enough. We need presence. We need priority. We need you to mean it this time." Marcus typed back, "I mean it. I'll prove it, however long it takes." The next morning, Christmas Day, Marcus began the work of rebuilding his life. He called his brother, apologizing for years of putting business before family. He started researching therapists who specialized in workaholism and emotional availability. He made a plan to restructure his role at work, hiring a co-CEO to share responsibilities so he could actually have a life outside the office. But more importantly, he reached out to Maria and asked if she'd allow him to help in return for what she'd given him. Not with money, not at first, though that would come later, but with time and presence. He showed up at Rosie's diner and washed dishes during Maria's shifts so she could sit with Emma. He tutored Emma in math, discovering he loved teaching. He connected Maria with better-paying job opportunities through his network, not as charity, but as a genuine reference for someone whose work ethic and character he'd witnessed firsthand. He met Sophie for supervised visits that winter, showing up early and staying present. Leaving his phone in the car, he learned to braid her hair, helped with homework, and listened, really listened. When she talked about her day, it was hard work, rebuilding trust one small moment at a time. But Emma had been right. Hard things were usually the right things. 6 months later, on a warm June evening, Marcus stood in Maria and Emma's apartment, which was slightly bigger now, in a better neighborhood. Emma was at the table doing homework. Maria was cooking dinner, and next to Marcus, holding his hand, was Sophie, who'd asked to come meet the family her father kept talking about. "Is that really Mr. Floppy?" Sophie asked, spotting the stuffed rabbit on Emma's bed. "Yeah, your dad borrowed him when he was sad. And now he's not sad anymore, so Mr. Floppy did his job," Emma explained proudly. Sophie looked up at Marcus. "You were really sad, Dad?" "The saddest I'd ever been, sweetheart. But you're not anymore." Marcus looked around the small apartment at this makeshift family who'd saved his life, then at his daughter's upturned face. "No, baby, I'm not, because I learned what actually matters. That night, as he drove Sophie back to Jennifer's house, she said quietly, "Mom says if you keep being like this, maybe you can come to my birthday party. And maybe after that you could come to more things." "I'll be at everything you'll let me attend," Marcus promised. "Forever. That's a long time, Dad." "Not long enough," he replied. Christmas Eve came around again, finding Marcus in a very different place. The divorce had been called off. He and Jennifer were in couples counseling, slowly rebuilding. He'd restructured his entire career, finding a balance he'd never thought possible. But on this Christmas Eve, he wasn't with them yet. He'd asked for permission to spend the evening somewhere else first. He arrived at Maria and Emma's new apartment with presents, but more importantly, with news. Through his foundation, he'd established a scholarship program for single parents pursuing education, named it after Emma, and asked Maria to help run it. He'd also convinced his company to implement radical family-first policies, leading an industry-wide change in how success was measured. But the best present was the one Emma gave him, a drawing of their first meeting, showing a sad man on a bench and a little girl holding a rabbit. At the bottom, in careful printing, she'd written, "The night my friend found his heart again." "I didn't find it," Marcus said, pulling her into a hug. "You gave me yours when I needed it most. You and your mom taught me that the richest person isn't the one with the most money, but the one with the most love. You saved my life, Emma Rodriguez." Later, as snow began to fall again on another Christmas Eve, Marcus left their apartment and headed to Jennifer's house, where Sophie waited for him. He was expected. He was wanted. He was home. He carried Mr. Floppy with him, no longer as a reminder of sadness, but as a symbol of the most important truth he'd ever learned, that sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what actually matters. That kindness from unexpected places can change your entire life. That a little girl's generosity could teach a CEO what success really means. In his pocket was a small velvet box with a ring, the same ring he'd proposed with years ago, ready to ask Jennifer to marry him again, this time with a promise he knew he could keep, because he'd finally learned what Emma had tried to tell him that snowy night. It's never too late to become who you're supposed to be. It's never too late to choose love over achievement, presence over presence, being there over being successful. All it takes is the courage to accept help from a 7-year-old girl with a one-eyed rabbit and a heart big enough to save a stranger crying alone in the snow.